But part of the reason why the Eagles are the number one, not just their starting five, which I do believe, if you kept the discussion to just that, who's got the best starting five in the National Football League? I think it would be the Eagles. But the reason why the Eagles are an easy best offensive line choice is they not only have their starting five, they've also got some of the best depth in the National Football League.
Yeah, I agree with you. Most people do these lists and they're talking about the starting five. And I say sort of what you just said.
It is a Thursday edition of Bird 365. You got your Mac and Mac guy, John McMullen and Jody McDonald, here to hang with you for the next couple hours, Mother Nature permitting.
Yeah.
Both John and I had major downpours over here in South Jersey. Something rolled through here and it got pitch black. I thought maybe I could go back to bed because it was dark out. It was dark enough out to go back to bed. No such luck. We're here to hang with you guys for the next 2 hours and talk Philadelphia Eagle football, a Thursday edition. JM, we are 87 days away from opening day, opening afternoon, a 1 o'clock start for the Eagles on the second Saturday in September. And show number 288, we are a scant 2 shows away from cracking the 300 barrier Birds 365 episode.
288. We need 12. I'm not usually the math guy, but
290. Did I say 288? I meant 298.
All right, 298. Wow.
We're 298. We're 2 away from 300, big guy.
I didn't think we were that close. That's why I took the 288 to be correct. I didn't think we cracked the 290.
Next Monday will be our 300th episode.
All right. We should have a cake. Xander Krause, if you're listening, you should get us a cake. Say happy 300th show. Something. Some kind of balloons, something. Bunting. Give me bunting.
Holding my breath. You know what I did find out? They doubled our makeup allowance from 0 to 0 because you can see I still have that big chunk on my head.
You got to watch those trees, especially today. Oof.
No, I'm not going anywhere today. If it stays this dark out, yours truly will be inside waiting for the Phillies game. And that was cool yesterday to be able to get up. Took a nap, got up at 1 o'clock, first pitch, boom. Had to wait 3 hours before they did anything of consequence. But then Garrett Stubbs, it's a walk-up 3-run home run. Got to wait till a night game tonight against the Washington Nationals. Not the Commanders, but I got a Commander point to make at some point over the next couple hours. JM, here's where I want to start today, and we are still in the season of lists. That the Pro Football Focus, that a website that we allude to a lot here, give them credit for the good work that they put in. Don't always agree with it, but oftentimes what they do is on point and it's research based. They last week put the Philadelphia Eagles as the number 1 offensive line in football. I'm not going to argue, are you?
No, I have no problem with it. There's some other very few that could be in the conversation. I think Cleveland, but they don't have J.C. Treader anymore. And it looks like, J.C. Treader is still out there. That's a union deal because he's still one of the best 5 centers in the NFL in my mind, and he's still available. And there's a lot of teams that could use him, to say the least. I think the 33rdteam.com, which is Joe Banner's website, Mike Tannenbaum, they had the Eagles, and they do it tier-wise, their list, and they have the Eagles in tier 1. I think Kansas City, no surprise, is also in tier 1. So they would be in the conversation. But a very good Tampa Bay, even though they lost their guards, they brought back Shaq Mason, so they're still really good on the offensive line. Very few teams are in the conversation. So I have no problem saying the Eagles have the best offensive line in football.
Nor do I. And you base the majority of that kind of ranking on your 5 starters. There is some debate as to who the right guard starter is going to be. There isn't, in my mind, if Isaac Seumalo is physically ready to go. I think he will be that right guard. I think they will keep Jack Driscoll as a guy who can go in either at right guard and or right tackle, because as great as Lane Johnson is, over the last several years, there have been issues where he's missed games. So you need a ready to go right tackle to come off your bench. And I think they have that in Driscoll. But part of the reason why the Eagles are the number one, not just their starting five, which I do believe, if you kept the discussion to just that, who's got the best starting five in the National Football League, I think it would be the Eagles. But the reason why the Eagles are an easy best offensive line choice is they not only have their starting five, they've also got some of the best depth in the National Football League.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Most people do these lists and they're talking about the starting five. And I say sort of what you just said. If the Eagles, if you're just basing it on starting five, then Kansas City, Cleveland, as I said, the Detroit Lions, that's the other team, shockingly have a really good offensive line. And that was the other tier one team by the 33rd team.com. So very few teams. But if you add depth into the mix, it's not even close. It's Eagles number one by a long shot. And that's to me where they sort of lap the field. I was just talking to a former personnel guy, former scout in the league, and he said they have 8 starters, man, at least 8 starters, at least. And by starters, we're talking about, look, there's 32 teams, right? So there's 64 starting tackles, 64 starting guards, obviously 32 starting centers. Doesn't necessarily, when you talk about Andre Dillard, all right, maybe he's 40, I'm not saying he's great, but he should be a starter in this league. Same thing with Jack Driscoll, if you're going to default to Isaac Seumalo, or vice versa. If you're going to default to Jack Driscoll. And at least from a trade standpoint, Cam Jurgens, he's got to prove it. He's never played before, but obviously has starting level traits. And then you could even argue guys like Suo Peta, who's played a little bit. I don't necessarily count those guys, but they're serviceable. And if you look around this league, and we talked about with Ross Tucker yesterday, used to play offensive line in this league. Certain teams, even these good teams, they get 1 or 2 key injuries at key spots, and they fall apart because the replacements can't do anything. And that's where I think Jeff Stoutland really shines through, because he gets guys like Suo Peta and Brett Todd to the point where you can play them and they're going to be serviceable. And by the way, Jody, Detroit Lions, as I said, now it's mainly about Frank Ragnow, who's one of the best centers in the NFL now. Penei Sewell, who's going to be really, really good, had a good rookie season. Taylor Decker's still there. So it's mainly about those guys. But also starting at right guard for them, Halapulu Bati-Baitai.
Still there, yeah.
Yeah. And tier one Detroit Lions, Halapulu Bati-Baitai. It's a perfect example
of guys who are here and ended up elsewhere, and if not raised their game, kept it at that same top flight level they had when they were a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. You mentioned Dillard and the fact that you think he's a starting level player. Certainly he's not going to start here because he's buried behind Jordan Mailata, who comes into his own this past year and played to a Pro Bowl type level at left tackle. Let's say the Eagles stay healthy. Oh, they're supposed to, because they have the secret sauce to staying healthy in the National Football League.
Yeah. I don't buy that, but yeah.
Don't practice, don't work out, you can't get hurt. The Eagles have no issues on the offensive line. Everybody is healthy. Other teams do have issues specifically at the left tackle, but because, oh, by the way, even though we know it here in Philadelphia that Andre Dillard is basically a left tackle, been there, done that, tried him at right tackle, didn't work, doesn't mean that if a team decided that they wanted to make him a right tackle and they used all off season to get him up to speed to be a right tackle, well, any team except the Eagles, because Eagles don't really practice during the offseason, but you get my drift. Someone wanted to convert him to a right tackle. Maybe they could pull it off. The Eagles tried to do it on the fly, and it didn't work out at all. So he's a left tackle. If you're going to attempt to acquire him, you're going to do so as a guy who you can plug in at left tackle. If there is an injury to a team around the National Football League and they see that as a desperate move, are the Eagles going to make him available? And if so, what do you think the ask is going to be for draft compensation?
I think if they can get a valuable piece, and we always bring up Chuck Clark, I think player for player they'd be more willing to do it. Otherwise, I think with Andre, it's going to be more toward the trade deadline when they get as much they sort of can ring, which I think is November 1st. The NFL just set the key date, so it's going to be November 1st this year. I think they're going to keep them as long as possible because they do value the depth. And then they understand, look, after the season, they're going to lose them anyway. And then you start talking about trade more realistically. But also, you have the comp pick equation into it, and the Eagles tend to think ahead of it with these things. And left tackles get paid money. And he could be in the comp pick conversation. So you say, are we going to be heavily in the free agent market? Are we going to be able to get comp picks? It's a more complicated puzzle than it might seem on the surface with Andre Dillard. I think they trade him for something valuable. And by valuable, I mean a player that could be a starter, like at safety, or even a third outside corner that might have to play a lot, or, who knows, a tight end, a real tight end too. Some of these issues where you have some depth problems with the Eagles. Or, I don't think the conversation starts lesser than a fourth round pick, and I'd be surprised if they take a fourth round pick for Andre Dillard.
So you think they'd ask for a third?
Yeah.
And if they are so motivated, would have to settle for a fourth. And you think fourth's a maybe if someone's offering less than a fourth, no sale, they'll keep them all year as a backup before they give them. Well, I agree with your take on it in almost every respect except for one. I don't think they'll do as well in season as they would do before the season started. Couple of reasons. Number one, if you're going to give something up for the player, which, by the way, if the Ravens offered Chuck Clark, I'd drive Andre Dillard to Baltimore in exchange for him.
Yeah, and they don't need a left tackle, so it's not a fit.
Right.
But
that's Ronnie Staley's there. If he goes down, then they need a left tackle, but they know he's just a one-year player because they're locked into Staley coming back, and Dillard is a free agent at the end of the season. So the Ravens are a bad match. I realize why you brought the name up, because that's what you're looking for. A type of a positional player where a team may have excess and are willing to give the player up, but they probably wouldn't be a fit for Dillard. If you're acquiring him in season, you're only getting him for X number of games. For every game you play, that's one less game that you're getting out of Andre Dillard if you're plugging him in to become your left tackle. So I think the value will be at its highest before the season starts. Now, as you pointed out, every game he's here with the Eagles, that's protection they have as a backup offensive left tackle. And they do value that. And you never know, Jordan Mailata could turn an ankle and go out. So I get those are the two things you're balancing. I don't think Dillard is going to be a major contributor this year. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic. Got the eagle-colored glasses on, believing that Jordan Mailata is going to play all 17 games. But I think Howie Roseman will look to move the player when his value is at its highest, and I think it will be during the preseason, because if another team is going to make a play for him, you know that you're going to have to either re-sign him, which could become expensive, or you want to get the most out of him that you can, which means as many games as you can. That's why I think he's worth more preseason than he is in season.
Yeah, I see your thought process there. My assumption is anybody who would be trading for him would rework the deal in any way, and he would be their left tackle. So that might alleviate some of those issues. But Or
You
from the
think
Eagles,
you think he's good enough to do that?
yeah. I'm not talking about you know, a monster contract. I'm talking about if a team is looking to acquire him, they're probably going to extend him. Might be 1 year, might be 2 years, might be 10 million a year because it's a very valuable position. I'm not talking top of the line money, but
No.
if a team wants to acquire a left tackle and Andre Dillard's there and they need a left tackle and they need a left tackle moving forward because they're probably not going to want to acquire him for half a season, as you mentioned, then I think that would be the thought process behind the team trying to acquire him. From my thought process on the Eagles, and one thing I should have brought up to begin with, and you bring up, yeah, the hope is he's not going to be a major contributor. I mean, the hope is Jordan Mailata starts 17 games. You know, Jordan, I just put this out there. Jordan's had a lot of back problems. Jordan is the Eagles list him. I was just looking at it. 365. He hasn't seen 365 in a while. He's 380. Now he looks good with 380. He's one of the few people in the world that can carry 380. And he doesn't, he's not overweight or anything of that nature, but he's 380 pounds and he's had back problems. And I do think that's a little bit of something the Eagles throw in the mix and they say, it might not even be serious, but it might be a game here. It might be a game there. You might need them for a stretch of games, 3-4 games. And they do value it. And we talk about the depth in tier one and, people are talking about the starting five. Then you go down to LaRaven Clark, who's, again, a serviceable player. I'd put him more in the Suo, Peta, Brett Toth category, or Toth. I wouldn't put him in the Andre Dillard category. So I do think the Eagles are weighing this in the fact they know they're going to lose him ultimately. They can, wait out the year, hope for the comp pick. If you're not going to sign more free agents than you lose, you can go about it that way. You can trade, you can do it early. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can do it. But I think this team thinks they're good. And if they think they're good, play it out, keep them. All right. And then you talk about it next year. You lose people in free agency all the time. But if you think you're a real good team, if you think you have a chance to compete with the Dallas Cowboys, and never mind the Dallas Cowboys, but the Rams and the Green Bays and the Tampa Bays of the world, if you think you can compete, don't give up one of your strengths just because you're worried about next year. Go compete.
Right. And if you think Dillard is a guy who keeps you that much more competitive, in case you haven't watched Birds 365 before, John's a bigger Joe fan than I am. I think he's another left tackle. John thinks he's a left tackle waiting to start as soon as he gets into the league. If you're right about that, oh, by the way, if Dillard gets traded in season and I'm his agent, I tell him, well, let's start with starter money. Top half of the NFL starter money at left tackle. If not, let's let our guy go in and kick tail for you for half a season. Then we'll have a conversation with you and every other team in the National Football League because I'm taking my client out on it onto the market. If I'm Dillard and I'm his agent and you think you're as good as John McMullen thinks you are, you don't want to sign a contract extension.
Well, and remember, while I do think he's a starting level player, you and I may disagree there. I think you would agree with me. He's better than LaRaven Clark. And again, I mean, it's an insurance.
Not that big a difference. Honestly, not that big a difference. You say, Jody, pick one. I'm going to take Dillard. But do I think there's a massive drop off to LaRaven Clark? No, I don't.
And from the Eagles' perspective, it's like buying insurance, right? You got to have it. You need it. You hope you don't have to use it, but it's nice to have if you have to use it. And that's my thought process from the Eagles. If you think you're a contender, look, if you thought you were coming into the season last year when nobody thought the Eagles were going to do anything, then I'm like, trade him. All right, go ahead, get something for him. He's not going to be here. This team thinks they're good. If they think they're good, I want the insurance policy.
Yeah, coming into last season, we didn't even know who was going to be the starting left tackle. Dillard got the first reps in camp over Jordan Mailata. That tells you how much things can change in a 12-month period. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We got a good one planned for you here on Birds 365. Two good guests coming your way. Rob Marty, our pal from Associated Press, will be on. I saw Tom Brady on the Dan Patrick show yesterday. Started up a couple Brady questions. You know, Marty's always on top of the Eagle stuff. He was here for that many years before he went national for AP. So looking forward to talking to Rob Marty in hour number 2. Hour number 1, joining us next is Ryan Rothstein. You catch him on WIP. He'll be talking birds here with McMullen and McDonald on Birds 365.